You know, out of the current 17 classes, I've never really had one that truly clicked with me. I mean, you have classes like the Wizard, Warrior and Paladin, which are all fun classes, don't get me wrong, but when I sat down and actually played the Samurai properly, I've pretty much thrown every other class aside to play it, and it's currently the class I'm focusing on exalting at the moment. It's got fairly consistent damage through its katana, it's got a few good wakizashis, and I just want to say quickly, I don't know how Eastern Winds is 1-4, maybe I'm just a shit, I don't know, but I don't see the appeal. Good range and access to Glad Guard and Mercies, and I wasn't really supposed to tell you guys this, but if you get really good at the Samurai, you can even do shit like this. At this point, it is my favourite class in the game, and I'm making this video to show why you should play the Samurai. This is a new type of series that I'm gonna hopefully try out on the channel, but for every class I'm going to break down the video into multiple sections to better explain how the class works, as well as the strengths and weaknesses. Those categories will be the following: the type of weapons and armor it uses, as well as an ability breakdown, how it does in each stage of the game, its strengths and weaknesses, what it contributes to a group, and finally I'll talk about its best in slot equips, as well as my overall opinions on the class. I touched on it a little earlier, but the Samurai is absolutely blessed with the combination of a katana and heavy armor. Katanas offer a decent amount more range than swords at 4.75 tiles compared to 3.5. On top of this, it also offers the third highest average DPS out of all weapon types, and combined with its 30 defense and heavy armor, which offers the most defense out of the 3 armor types, can pretty much stay immortal unless you get insta-popped. If you couldn't tell, I'm still heated as fuck about this death. Its ability is insanely good. It exposes enemies, which adds 20 damage onto every single attack they take. It may not sound a lot, but it really does add up over time. It also gives dexterity on equip, which is always nice for the DPS goblins. The waki is fairly simple to use, but if an enemy is on a wall, you do have to kind of reposition yourself. The damage on the T7 waki is pretty dumb. On top of getting 7 dex, it deals an average of 2300 target piercing damage. For comparison, the T7 spell worm deals around 2800 average damage, assuming all shots hit. And in a lot of cases where bosses are smoothing a lot, you'll probably miss a decent amount unless you're cracked at aim or using auto spell. And in that case, you should probably auto aim onto some host. As with tiered wakis, if your cursor is anywhere near the boss, you'll probably hit your shots. If not, then Samurai probably isn't the class for you. Hell, Realm probably isn't the game for you. That's a joke, don't get mad, please. Thank you. In the early game, which to me is like Godlands dungeons, like Snake Pits, Abysses, stuff like that, I personally think the Samurai is fairly strong. It doesn't suffer from the same range constraints that sword classes face, while still being able to retain the high defense from heavy armor. It also gets an insanely good utility ability, the Ronin's Wakizashi, during this stage of the game. I just want to put more emphasis on how good having range is during the early game. This is because you have way less risk dying due to your stats likely not being maxed at this point in the game. In the mid game, I could imagine that the tiered katanas may start feeling kind of weak, but luckily there are quite a few upgrade paths you can take. Doku is great at providing range and has an 1000 damage burst that makes it rival even T13 and 14 katanas. The Celestial Blade is also another DPS option you can take, but I think the shot pattern is a bit harder to use than Doku. That's just my opinion. It also doesn't pierce, so keep that in mind. In terms of wakizashis, the Eastern Winds and Crossing Fires are probably your 2 best options at this stage. Eastern gives a nice 5 speed on equip, which is good for rushing or running away from enemies, and Crossing Fires provides DPS stats and its damage is pretty decent. In terms of armor, I suggest you just use tiered, because Mercy's Bane is kinda on Samurai. This damage is good enough to solo core dungeons and some of the epic dungeons in a timely fashion, and in the endgame it becomes disgustingly strong due to its equips, but I'll talk about that more in the best in slot section. I've listed out most of the strengths already: the good damage, the good range, the ability, the defense, and in terms of weaknesses there are only 2 I can really think of. One of them is aiming the wakis, and even then, tiered wakis and wakis like Ryu's Blade and the Shadow Serpent one are extremely easy to use. The other weakness I can understand is that the samurai may feel somewhat weak without any UT katanas, and even then all of his good katanas are forgeable. Just don't forge this one, you'll thank me later. In a group setting, Expose is an extremely useful debuff, and its utility exponentially increases as more people are attacking. Yo, post edit samba here, and I kinda realized that this can apply to pretty much every debuff, but I hope you get what I was trying to say here. Yeah, and now for my favorite segment of this video, the best in slots. Now, every weapon has really good UTs, but in most cases people still swap between it and their tier counterparts due to short patterns or range, etc. Katanas work a little differently. You see, take 2 Ray katanas, let them snort like 5 lines of coke, super glue them together, and you have Enforcer. This weapon is so disgustingly broken to a point where it is literally the only katana you need in your inventory. The DPS gap between it and every other viable katana is genuinely insane. The only katana that comes close is the Celestial Blade, and even then the short pattern and range make it a vastly inferior choice. As for Wakizashis, the T7 is the only competitor for damage for the best in slot. Plus 40 and a whopping 7 dex, 4 second expose time and high damage make it a no-brainer. Ronin provides one of the best slows in the game, which is really nice in dungeons like the Nest and the Fungal and Crystal Caverns. I highly recommend that you stay strapped with one at all times. Eastern is nice for the speed and the expose time, and you should use this if you don't have a T7. As for armor, you could run T15, but I find it has more than enough defense with Glad Guard while also giving it a nice 7 speed, which helps a lot in 03 and gives 5 to each DPS stat. Mercies is the option for DPS min-maxing, but I feel a little too squishy with only 10 defense. In terms of rings, I'm getting a lot of mileage from Horn. Because of the range from Enforcer, the plus 10 dex is up a decent amount of the time, and the 140 HP and 5 def adds to its already great survivability. Rings like Crown, Monocle and Cranium are also definitely best in slot items, but Horn is just personal preference honestly. With the right equips, I do think Samurai is a top 5 class, and it is a really fun one. This upload came relatively late, but it's because I've been a bit burnt out on making content on this game. I think I'm at it now, so I'll continue, but if anyone has like any general topics or games they like to see me talk about, do drop a comment, I'd appreciate it. If you got the time, check out my guy's Twitch channel, it'll be the first link in the description. And I've said pretty much everything I've needed to. If you've made it this far, a like and or a subscription will be much appreciated, and that's all from me. Make sure to enjoy the rest of your day or night.